Cool. Screen two. Well, okay. I'd like to start. Okay, I'm Anthony Mack. I'm John Mack's son and his best friend. I knew I wasn't going to get through that. So I apologize in advance for any emotional outbreaks. I'm going to try to get through these whole slides. For people to talk remotely, I got to stop presenting. So I originally was going to intermix back and forth. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try to get through this whole slide deck. Think of the most beautiful song you've ever heard. I don't know. I got a couple. Just because it has an ending doesn't make it any less beautiful. And that's true for my dad. Shoot. Got to get those walls up. I'm sorry. Okay, so let me just go on. So my dad loved technology. He was a very curious person from day one, and his curiosity led him down the line of learning what is humanity doing. And out of all the people that's ever lived, and we're talking back to the Roman times to today, my dad probably saw more technological changes than anyone. When he was born, his milk was delivered by a horse-drawn milk wagon. And he understood how quantum computers work. When Aaron and I went up there to see Google's quantum computer, I came back and told Dad all about it. He wanted to know all the details on how it worked. When he was born, there was still gas lighting in the streets. Not the houses, they had been mostly converted, but there was still gas lighting when my dad was even 10 years old. And yet he understood how CRISPR-Cas9 is the editing tool for the human genome. To go from that to that, he learned about vacuum tubes in college. And he was very curious about the new technology where you use light instead of electrons. So instead of electronics, which is what he's done his whole life, the future may be full of photonics. And these new silicon versions of those allow our modern practices to actually work with light instead of electrons. He was interested in this 2 months ago. So here's Dad's life in a nutshell. Damn it. So he was born in 1927 in his home, did a bunch of stuff, and then died Christmas Eve in his home. That's what he wanted. That's what he got. I was glad I was able to do that for him. Charles and Ron here both had a key part of that. The three of us have been taking care of Dad for, at least the last year or so. And I'm going to sort of cover his life in a nutshell. It's impossible. I could fill a 10-hour-long documentary on his life, and huge parts of it have been left out, but I've just chosen key little parts. Start with his parents. They were middle-class Londoners. He was born in the north in London, and he had he's one of 5 siblings, so he had 4 siblings. Bill was his, closest in age. So the age is, Wiggy is the oldest. They all have real names, but we don't use those. And then David, and then Dad, and then Bill and Tim. And he's outlived all of them. So I guess that's good. But he was particularly close to these 2. Tim came later. Tim was 20 years behind him. But boy, Tim lived a fast and furious life. He was the manager of the band Pink Floyd and drove a high-speed car around, and he lived brightly. Just really fast and short. He died of cancer. Anyway, here's Dad. I don't know, was he 5 years old there? He got my hair, or I have his hair. This is him with his sister at 29 Southway before the bombing. He lived through the bombing of London. This is not his house. I can't find a picture. Unfortunately, it was so hard to find pictures. But the bomb landed on the house next door. and they were all in their house. And they heard, I think the sirens and the bombs coming. You can hear boom, 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 bam. And they all got into their table, which was a sort of a hard, strong table, except for the father. My dad always had the story of his father holding this newspaper, doing this, because the whole ground was rocking back and forth. So I asked his sister, Bill, to tell the story. And she said, oh yeah, there was all these plates. They had in those days a rail near the ceiling, and they put all these plates on it. And she said, when the bomb hit, they all came crashing down. We were under the table, and all these plates were just smashing all around us. She said, except for one plate, the most expensive plate, it was an original signed Lalique. It survived. Where is it? I don't know where that's gone to, but I have it. And then we had an earthquake, and I came running down to save it, and I tripped over the dog and never was able to save it, but it survived that earthquake. So this has been through the wars. My dad saw the R-101 go overhead as a little boy. He was sitting up there and looking up and going, wow, look at that. He also flew in the Concorde, just to sort of show you the span of his life, from dirigibles to supersonic passenger jets. This was one of his favorite houses because it had a big attic. Okay, this was taken near Halloween. Batman wasn't there at the time. And in this attic, he made his own disc recorder, optical recorder, magnetic recorder. He played back people their voice. His parents had never heard their own voices before. And he made this, the very first one, he handheld the cutter and cut about 4 grooves in it. You cut it in wax, and then you put a needle in it, and you make a pressing from it. His optical recorder, I mean, it's beautiful. This is his actual, those other ones were just, this is his actual recorder. And this is a light source. It hits a galvanometer, which shakes. It's got a little magnet that shakes. That varies the amount, see this little V pattern? That little V moves up and down, varies the amount of light that goes down this tube into the recorder, and the negative sits in here, comes down, gets exposed, and goes back. He did this all on his own. Can't find a picture of his pirate radio station, but they did these little acts. His whole family got involved in this. They would transmit it. Actually, they put it across wires, and they put the transmitters at a friend's house, because if they ever got caught by the BBC or whatever, the radio police, this was totally legal. They wanted him to go down, and we only wanted to lose the transmitter, not the whole studio. Until one day, a friend had a car radio. Yes, you could actually get the size of a radio down to a box about that big, and you could get it in a car. And he's driving his car, and the radio station, the pirate radio station, is getting quieter and quieter and quieter. And then he drives up a hill, and it's booming in, and he comes back and says, shut down, we're getting all the way to some hill. So apparently they broadcasted to a lot of people when the regular stations all would shut down at night. So he would be transmitting during the night. His sister, Whitney, went to America, and my dad said, hey, can you bring back, I think it was a Popular Science. I can't swear it, but I think it's a Popular Science. And there's an article in there on how to make a single tube radio. And in that article, it says, go to your junk box and grab a 1S4 pentode. And Dad was like, oh my God, in America, people have 1S4, they have pentodes in their junk boxes. I mean, so the world is paved with vacuum tubes apparently in America. Well, it turns out he's right, he's wrong. Not everybody has pentodes in their junk box. I went into my junk box and I could only find these tetrodes. So we don't all have that particular one. In any case, that got him. It's really that. That was the spark, I think. When he tells the story, he has several reasons for coming to America. But I think it was that article that started. He got his degree at Faraday House, and the year he graduated, 1947, is the year the transistor got invented. As an electrical engineer, you think, oh my gosh, everything I learned is now obsolete. Of course it's not. You learn how to learn. You go to college not to learn specifics. So of course, Dad learned the whole new technology, and he was an electrical engineer his whole life, all based on transistors, of course. His good friend, John Tozer, said, hey, how about we go to America? And I can't believe he did this. He was such a stable guy to pull up and leave your family behind. Just say, bye, I'm out of here. Takes a lot of guts and courage. but there's only one place to do his dream, movies. He wanted to do sound in movies. Now, just Hollywood. I mean, there's no other place. It's Hollywood. He's got to get to Hollywood. So anyway, he gets the cheapest ticket he possibly can, which was on a Liberty ship. They stamped these things out. These ships were like, they made these like, I think they made 2 a day at some point. And so these were like just junk ships. And it turned out that when they're going back and forth to make a little extra money, they would rent out the closet down there in the engine compartment, and Dad rented it. So he got a cheap ticket, got on this Liberty ship, and came to New York City and started looking for a job. He just arrived without knowing anybody. He had an aunt, Ellis, but she was in another state. And he just started looking for a job. And here he is recording the sounds of lapping waves. He took pictures of it. And he got a job working for Les Paul, who was a huge name at the time. And Mary Ford and Les Paul were like, I don't know, bigger than Madonna back then. And he worked at his studio. This is Les's house that I've been to. We went back, you know, when Dad was saying, hey, you know, let's go to New York, and when we were there, visit Les. And I was always kind of curious to see, you know, will he recognize, will let him come over to his house? We knock on the door swings open, and Les goes, John, and gives him this huge hug. And then they go inside, and you should have heard the two of them. I wish I could have recorded it. They were going through all the, you know, hey, you remember this, remember that, you remember this? And he still has all this stuff sitting crammed in his house. The studio here is his living room, and now it's got more couches and TVs in it, but basically this room was still there. And Dad went in there and he said, oh, he knew exactly all the pots and everything. But to tell you how humble Dad is, Dad never told me of all his accomplishments he did with Les. He told me about there was a commercial with Listerine, and they wanted to use one of his songs. Well, songs are really long, commercials are really small. And Dad had to make a shorter version of that. And he played it back to Les, and he just cringed when they cut out. If you know how to play a song and someone removes part of it, but it was a perfect cut, and it was used on the thing. So I heard that story. But when we went over to his house, Les started naming all the things Dad did with him. And, you know, he gave him this shirt. So this is not a Les Paul shirt. This is Les Paul's shirt. He gave this to us. You know, so it's so sweet. And at one point I said, hey, can you sign a picture for Dad? I want silent, because you don't, you know, at no point was there ever any of this kind of, he's a superstar, and that all of a sudden it's like, oh, we're now in that mode. And so it's at home. When you come to my house, you can see it. But I really regretted doing that. I didn't take any pictures while I was there, but we did do one fun thing. He said, hey, I do my Tuesday routine down at the Iridium. It's a little bar down in downtown New York City. And he invited Dad up to the stage, and Dad was in the bathroom when he did it. And it was a huge thing. Invited him up. Dad said a couple of stories, and Les was just enthralled. He had the whole audience laughing. These two guys, they're just, it's a time that has come and gone. Anyway, then finally off to Hollywood, right? The whole goal was to get to Hollywood. We got to get to the big time. And, you know, New York is got commercials and stuff, but this is where he really wanted to go. And one of the first jobs he got was on the Steve Allen Show. Well, probably today nobody knows it, but there's these talk shows, and you know, I don't know who the big one is, you know, Jay Leno or whatever. Well, it wasn't Jay Leno back then, it was Steve Allen, and Dad worked on the show, and these are pictures he took. So there's the actual set going on with the camera, and that's what's actually being broadcast. This is where Dad worked in the back, where you can see the stage, but you have your monitors and your sound mixing stuff. So I worked on that for a couple of years, and then the company sent him out to be a recordist on a movie called Marines Let's Go. And the only reason why I have this in here was because I was going to start off with a joke about I caught Dad's dying moments on camera, and I'm going to show them to you. And I thought, well, boy, that's not a very sensitive joke. But then again, Dad would probably like that. Well, anyway, so he's working as a sound man, and he works in this trailer. And all of a sudden, the script calls for Dying Englishman. Hey, hey, we need a diagnosis man. Well, there's one now. Grab John. So they grab John and stick him in a uniform that is just far too small. It's not for him. Put some makeup on him. I think this is, that's one of the actors. And they literally throw him in front of the camera. They had these huge brute lights. It's just, it's you know, a full-on real movie. And now today you wouldn't know it, but it would be something you would have back then. And so here it is. Here's Dad's famous dying scene. Famous dying scene. So he's looking for his girlfriend, and Dad's going to tell him where she is.
Anything I can do?
No, I've had it.
Where are the people who lived here?
Most got away. In the wood.
Are there many Chinese patrols?
Yes. Yes. Watch out, Yank.
Not bad for you know, just a spontaneous, hey, grab the sound man kind of guy. But one thing I kind of like about this is, like, the first line is, you know, hey, can I do anything for you? No, I've had it. That was just totally Dad. I mean, he literally was like that right up to his last moments. Didn't want to be any trouble to anybody, and just wanted to be helpful. And I just thought, well, that's kind of fun. So then he gets sent on location to probably one of the largest productions that ever happened or ever will happen, called Cleopatra, which I don't know if you guys know it, but everybody knew it back then. And I owe my life to this movie. My dad, of course, was a recordist, so he had microphones everywhere, and of course is recording stuff. And there was this nice young woman, my mom, and her coworker Elizabeth Taylor, who stood everywhere she did first. She's a stand-in. Her job is to sit and allow these people to set up all the lights and get everything perfect, the camera tracking and all that. So she would sit somewhere for hours, and then Liz would come in, shoot the scene, and leave. So every scene that you see her in that movie, my mom was there 10 times longer. And it also put her, since she was in a lot of the scenes, it is called Cleopatra, my mom was pretty much on every call sheet, because there were people everywhere. You know, she had to go to many locations, and so was my dad. So funnily enough, my dad and my mom were probably on more sets than anyone else, certainly the actors. Like Marie, her good friend, was Liz's double. So when you see the scene of her rolling out of the carpet, that's Marie coming out, because you would never take a superstar and roll him out of a carpet. But she was only there on that scene and a couple of others, where my parents were there all the time. So they got to see it all. And when I say all, it was the biggest spectacle. They didn't have CG in those days. You couldn't just, digitally add a background. You had to build the background. These things were the size of, these sets were the size of small cities. And it was full of, I don't have to wear this up here. It's full of these huge famous people, and Mankiewicz and director. And Dad, of course, loved the technology. This is a Tadeo camera where special people would come and you know, touch the negative. Nobody could touch it. It's all, it was just, everything about this movie was just, it was dialed up to 11. This is the bathtub scene. Dad's up, he's the gangways above. It's very exciting. It's just, you really can't grab the feeling of excitement. There's my mom standing in this gigantic lab. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? You got a 200-pound person directly above my mom. Oh, well, it's just what you do. So all the scenes, as I said, that you saw, she got carried around. And of course, the, you know, these are probably the actors that are going to, but they're not, you know, they don't dress up usually. Sometimes they do dress up just before to get the color right. But for most of the stuff Mom did, everybody's usually out of costume. This is the scene where they burn the body of Caesar. And so that whole thing gets lit on fire in the movie. Turns out it never catches on fire. These are all gas pipes here. And Dad was saying, yeah, so they say 5 seconds before rolling, they say, light the fire, whoosh, and then, okay, cut the fire, whoosh, it just go out. So that just turned on and off for every scene. Nothing actually burns. The Sphinx. This Sphinx is huge. Now this is the actual molding. I think it's made out of fiberglass or something coming in. They had a special truck to bring it in. It's just gigantic. And this is the famous scene where Cleopatra enters Rome, and she's got to do it just, again, dialed up to 11. And these are extras. Nowadays, you just put them in CG. Oh, you want 5,000 people, you just put them in CG. In the old days, you had to have actual people. So my dad was responsible for the PA system to talk to 5,000 very talkative Italians. And every time you want to roll the camera, they're all talking. And so the director would come up to the mic and go, quiet on set, quiet, please. Hey, everybody, silence! He would yell out, and then there'd be this hush across the crowd. And then they'd start to, okay, you ready on speed? And it starts to go up again, and you get, shut up! To get that many people to go silent was hard. And it was Dad's PA system that did that. But kind of a fun little joke that my dad played on Mom was when she was on this gigantic Sphinx, there she is standing there. He would get on the PA system and go, telephone call for Patricia Beatty, telephone call for Patricia Beatty. And she'd be up there going, what? I can't get it. I'm not. And then he's just kidding. So anyway, they had a lot of fun. Mom says when she was up here, you're 40 feet up off the ground, and this whole thing is carried. The whole Sphinx is pulled by 200 slaves, and then a bunch of them take you, Cleopatra, down off to present to Caesar. She said the only thing you had was this tiny, tiny little belt holding you in. She says it was quite terrifying because, when they're walking, you get thrown around. And so anyway, they're more careful when Liz is in there, but when my mom's in there, it kind of threw her around a bit. So anyway, very exciting times. Yeah, here's where they walk you down. She was beautiful. I can see how my dad fell in love with her. He met both my mom and Marie at the same time. They stayed friends forever. But mom was the classier, and they had something going for each other. Plus, my dad had microphones all around the set, and he could listen in, and he heard Mom saying, hey, that John Mack over there, what do you think? So he kind of picked up on some eavesdropping dad of mine, kind of picked up on some stuff she was saying and figured out she liked him, and I think that gave him the guts to ask her out. And he actually went to fists to fight over her, which is kind of fun. He gave her an engagement watch. He said, will you marry me? And gave her a watch. And I think actually Mom she's pretty tipsy at the time. She says she barely remembers it. But the next morning, she wakes up with a watch and no ring. So, well, wait, am I engaged? Where's the engagement ring? So she goes back to Dad and says, hey, I love this watch. It's great, but where's the actual ring? You go, well, it's an engagement watch. Well, no, I can't. It's not an engagement watch. I need the engagement ring. So she talked Dad into getting a ring as well. So this has got to be Dad, right? I mean, Dad said, hey, and back then she was Patricia, go up there and they give him a glass of water. Anyway, they just were screwing around on the set. They're just all having a great time. And they got married. Right there in Rome, they got married in the Central Hall by the mayor. And everybody came, and they had a card everybody signed, which Rob has. Thank you, because they didn't stream it too well. But I mean, you probably know where the signatures are. But there's Liz and Burton and Mankiewicz all in. Anyway, they got married, and sorry. So and they had a honeymoon. They went to the Leaning Tower of Pisa. And Dad said, okay, Patricia, I'm going to take this. I want to straighten the Leaning Tower. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lean at the same angle it's leaning, and you lean the camera the same amount, and it will all look straight. This is the picture that came out. Apparently she didn't get it. I mean, today we can in post fix it, but of course I never will. So that's the Leaning Tower of Dad. Oh yeah, so they also went down Ithaca and somewhere else to do a lot of shooting. And they just have these scenes where it's just hundreds of horses and stuff. And these guys are just regular guys. So dad's just sort of chatting and bullshitting with them, and they're just having a good time. And then you yell action, and then these guys turn into these, stabbing, and then it's back to, hey, what's for lunch? Dad's just always screwing around, just always having a good time. So then they move, so they're married. He comes back to Hollywood. He's moved into he's actually renting a place from his friend's house. I'd love if we could find these pictures. And so they lived there for a very short period of time. Dad buys his Austin Healey. So this was one of his favorite purchases. He always wanted a beautiful sports car. And this is made by, it's an English car. And I grew up in the back seat or in the side seat. There's a little bump in the middle. No seat belts in those days. That was one of my favorite times, was when Dad and I would go driving around and vroom, vroom, I can hear a nice truck engine in there, very torquey. Then he bought 2140 Sunset Crest Drive, that house there. So this is the house Nina and I were born into. It was right there in the Hollywood Hills. And on May 20th, 1963, Nina was born. And right from the beginning, she was beautiful, just a beautiful baby. And maybe didn't get along quite as well as I did. But what great parents. Dad just took to being a father like that. Just right off the bat, he was the kindest, caringest, and he always said he always loved having kids because it gave you an excuse to act like a kid. You can now build sandcastles on the beach. If you build sandcastles on the beach as an adult, everybody looks at you kind of fine, but you stick a kid nearby, and now you're the greatest father in the world. So he always had that. Bought the Chevrolet Malibu. Charles drove that. I was born July 28, 64. And this is our backyard. And on this patio here, Dad drew these little lines. He loved traffic lights. And he built this for me. Sorry, I know my volume's way down over here. But he liked electronics, obviously. And he now had an excuse to make a traffic light. So this is an actual traffic light controller with proper, cams and everything. And you can see how old I was by the size of the traffic lights. It shows you how big I was. We would go around in these little cars, and the game was you had a can of water on the back of your tricycle, and with a hole in the bottom, so it would empty out. And we'd all drive around these little streets, and when your can was empty, you had to pull into the gas station. They fill up your can of water, and you drive around until it was empty again. And of course, there was an intersection, and we had a bunch of traffic lights. This is the kind of person Dad was. Too much noise. But he loved phones. Dad loved telephones. This is the Type 500, which is how I came into this world. Phones improved to this point and then have improved since then. But to me, that is a telephone. It's got a dial on it. And he said, you could kill a person with this phone. It was so well made. I mean, it was tough. You could tug and pull and throw it. Actually, my mom, in a fit of rage, did throw a Type 500 at me, cross over the top of the king size bed. It missed. I dodged. And all that happens, the dial came off. It didn't break off. It came off. I was able to just put it right back on, snap it right back on again. Awesome phones. So Dad made this little switchboard for me, and I don't have that one. It just had a couple of switches on it, and it had a couple of these phones, and you could turn a switch and make two phones connect. And we had a lot of fun picking it up. So you pick up the phone, and then you yell to the person, pick up your phone. And then, hey, I can hear you. And I came to Dad and said the famous lines, these are great, Dad, but can you make them ring? And that changed everything. He built this for me. Okay, I don't know if it was more him or me that he did this for, but, oh yeah, very good, thanks. This is a real set of jacks, that's what they're called, that a professional operator would use. And back in those days, there were hundreds of these. And an operator would have actually 1,000 holes in front of him. That's why there's 4 digits after the first 3. There's your exchange and then 4 digits, and that would tell the operator which one of these holes. Well, this is a small operation, so we only have 10. And so the way this would work is exactly the way the real operator, and Nina was the operator, and she would sit there with her little headset on, and someone would pick up their handset, and if they don't notice, you flick it. You just push on the hook switch, and it flashes the light. And you pick up a cord and you plug it in, and you turn this on. You say, "Number, please," which you love saying, and then they say, "I'd like to speak to number 2." We only had 1-digit phone numbers, so you put this in here, and then you could do this. Ring, ring. By pushing this forward, it would ring the phone. And that requires 100 volts to ring a phone. And that's difficult. And so I got to show you what effort my dad went through to make the phones ring. This is the dial tone generator. So when you pick up the phone, you hear boo, that's generated by this. This is a real generator from a real exchange. Then the line finder goes around and figures out which phone just picked it up. And, oh, okay, so sorry, this is the part I just showed you over there. Then Dad wanted to automate it. I forgot to say that part. So now we want to make it so the phones act like a real exchange. So he goes out and buys a Straga switch. This thing here was actually in operation. Millions of people made phone calls through it. It handled the last 2 digits of your phone call. So when you dialed a bunch of digits, the last 2 would go through this switch. It's a special switch. It has more relays on it. And when I was his age, my dad explained the whole thing to me. I could tell you what the A, B, C, D relay all did. This to me was normal. This was my life, and I thought everybody knew this stuff. And so anyway, all of the stuff in here was a labor of love. He did this because this is what he wanted to do and loved doing. This was his hobby. And when I was in 5th grade, I was talking to my science teacher, and the science teacher had a little bit of problem with how phones work. And I said, "Oh, well, it's simple. You just have a coil, you put a 6-volt battery, it goes in series, and yeah, you need to match the impedance with this." And I'm telling him all about how phones work. And he's like, and I was thinking, what, has your dad not told you this yet? It was about 5th grade when I found out that not everybody who's in 5th grade knows this stuff. It was my world. This was the world I grew up in. And it's what gave me my love of, and curiosity of technology, I guess. I'm going to skip over Dad's entire career at Universal. I loved it there. I got a bunch of stories, but I'll never get done if I include all those stories. So I apologize for that, but I can give you ones later. In the middle of that, we moved to Windways. So this is my family home to this day, and this is where we're going today. And we bought this in 1972. My dad was wandering down the street and meets a neighbor. And he goes, "Oh, my name's John Mack. What's yours?" He goes, "Oh, I'm Sid Solo." He goes, "Oh, you have the same name as one of my heroes. This guy, he's a brilliant chemist, president of CIF. He figured out how to make the development process fast." Anyway, I've read all his papers, and he goes, "That's me." He has passed, but his daughter Benita is here. And I'd like, Benita, can you come up and just say a little words about John? Save my breath for a little bit, and then I'll finish, if you don't mind. Thank you. So yeah, talking to both these mics, but that one is what everybody can hear remotely.
So we get to take.
Yes,
off
you can
our
take them
masks
up front.
Okay. So should I lower these?
Talk loud. Talk loud.
Whoops.
And I'm going to turn this up a little bit.
Okay.
Okay. There we go.
So I have to start with a call to my older brother, Greg, a few days ago. And I told him that you had asked me to say a few words, and that how excited John was to know that our father lived 2 houses away. And Greg said, "Well, John was like the top sound man in Hollywood." And that my dad never stopped talking to Greg about how excited he was that John lived up the street. So both of them were very modest men. And I never got to hear all these stories. I heard a few, but, and our father always built tube radios, and we had junk boxes filled with tubes all over the place. And so I got to know John through my parents' friendship. And after my parents were gone, John was always there for me. Anything that fell apart in our house, little cottage that was built in 1931 on the corner of Chiquita and Cliff. Anything, yes, right there. That's how it looks now. Back then, there was no fence. The streets were dirt. I was born in 1947. So we shared some dates there, and just John was the most friendly, helpful, loving, wonderful man. And so was my dad. And my dad went to NYU when he was 16, and he became the assistant chemist at CFI, Consolidated Film Industries, one of the top labs that made the prints that went out to the theaters. And so, of course, in my childhood growing up, we would be showing 16mm versions of different films all the time. In Laguna, we would show them out in the backyard. In Beverly Hills, we would show them and everybody would sit on the staircase. But it just so, yes, we grew up with building, my brothers building the tube radios like you did. And so John was just the most helpful, amazing, wonderful guy. And I'm gonna miss him very much.
Oh, we all are. Okay, I gotta get back to technology because. So, oh yeah, so I have a bunch of show and tell items up here, and I know I got to stay relatively near that, but I just want to point out this is the actual suitcase my dad came to America in. And there was a picture earlier on. This is the actual hat that he, oh, I'm sorry. That he wore in that picture that you saw. So I thought I'd bring that to show you. Here's the actual script for Cleopatra. Never threw it away. Dad never threw anything away. The old typewriter. But the two things on this table that probably changed my life the most, both purchased by Dad, was the TRS-80. The first personal computer he or I ever owned. He bought it for himself. He thought, okay, I'm going to program this thing. You didn't have software. You bought hardware in those days. There's no software. You had to write that. And so he bought that, and I just glommed onto it. I know I was only like 13 years old, but it was like, oh, wow, this is cool. He had a programmable calculator before that. And this thing was like programmable calculator on steroids. It had 64, columns and 24. It had graphics. You had 128 by 48. That was the resolution of the graphics of this thing. And you'll see the graphics in a minute because we shot the title sequence with a camera aimed right at the screen. Anyway, I and Dad together learned how to use this thing, and I kind of passed him because he had to go to work and I didn't. And so I was up on that thing all day long, just programming this up to the middle of the night and everything. And so this is how I learned to love computers, was through this thing. And every Christmas, we got a new peripheral. And I have looked high and low for a poem. Dad was actually poetic. He actually wrote poems. And one day on Christmas Eve, he reads out this poem that starts off, "'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the winter, we had to make do without a line printer." And I can't remember the rest of it. It had a whole bunch of things about, eyes being sore and, I had to make notes of what had just been seen and all. Anyway, lo and behold, we open our presents the next day and there's a line printer. Now, to tell you what this meant, that was $1,000 back then. So this is a huge investment, but I can't tell you how, it was basically Dad and I, everybody else was like, what's that? I don't know what that is. But it was back then when we said, okay, this is so great. Everyone is going to have a computer. Back in 1978, Dad and I realized, and we told people, everyone's going to have a computer. Oh, you mean all computer scientists are going to have a computer? No, everyone's going to, we didn't know where everyone's going to have a computer in their pocket, but this was the beginning. And the Christmas that we got our floppy drive, because everything was on a cassette, oh man, that was, as my dad said back then, this has been the happiest Christmas ever, not just because of that. We had Kitty over, who's still alive, and Harry, who got married at our house at Windways. It was just so festive and happy. And I all tie it back to this because now we could put 400,000 characters onto a single floppy drive, more data than you would ever need. So this is what really made us happy. And of course, technology moves forward. When the Macintosh came out, we actually didn't like Apple at the time because they were kind of competitors with the TRS-80. But when the Mac came out and we saw fat bits, oh, my dad loved fat bits. There was a program called Mac Paint, and you could zoom in to a part of it where you could see every single pixel. And this basically bitmap graphics, unheard of at the time. And so immediately, so this Mac over there is the original 128K Macintosh. It has the signatures of Steve Jobs and Wozniak in the inside. I've kept. And and by the way, that TRS-80 is the very first level 2. That Radio Shack sold 2 models, one with their BASIC and one with Microsoft Bill Gates BASIC. So the thing that made Bill Gates, well, billionaire, was that he started off putting BASIC into 4K of RAM, a good BASIC. And to get that one, you had to pay an extra $100, which we wanted to, but none were available. So we ordered a level 2, but they said, okay, we're going to send you a level 1 for now, and then in the future, we will send you one. We got a level 2. When you typed it in, we plugged it in, expected it to say ready, and it said memory size. This is a story my dad tells everybody. We're like, memory size, oh, it's broken. I was like, memory size, what the heck? And Dad opens the manual, says, when you turn on your level 2 TRS-80, it will come up with a prompt you for memory size. And we're like, level 2? So that is literally the first level 2. And when we told the store, they said, oh, bring it back in. We need them for demos. Oh, no. We'll pay you the extra $100 and we're keeping this. So that's literally the first level 2 TRS-80. And the Macintosh is probably the first couple of thousand. And I mean, the Mac, to this day, we're using mice, and icons and pull down menus. This was all unheard of before that. I mean, Xerox PARC had it in a building and that machine brought it to everybody. And it literally just changed the world. So the 4 of us were kind of a very tight-knit family because all of our family was in England. So Dad moved here, and the disadvantage of that is all your family is not here. And so we did everything together. We were a very, very tight family. And then I met Susan, and then Jillian was born, and the family got bigger. And this is, of course, what Dad did as soon as he was introduced to Jillian.
Here's something you can do with your baby to keep yourself and the baby entertained. It's called baby bumping cars. High-speed corn with a baby.
That didn't bother you too much, did it? Another thing, of course, being into technology, another thing we loved was science. And these people popularized science. Cosmos, we were glued to. When that aired, Dad and I loved that stuff, and we sucked it up. And then there's this guy, James Burke. I always have to pronounce that carefully because of the joke that's about to come up. He made this series called Connections. And both of these hold their own. You can watch them today. They're a little slow, but they're actually pretty good. Anyway, James Burke's Connections was something we were just watching. And Dad says, I'm showing Dad this new thing I'm doing. And he says, oh, hey, let's make a documentary of this in James Twerp fashion. I was like, what's that? And he says, roll the camera. And all of this is completely unscripted, unedited, basically. This is just pausing and unpausing the camera, grabbing a piece of paper that was sitting around. So this was just an afternoon of fun. We literally didn't know we were doing this 10 minutes before we did it. That's the TRC. Big Mac.
What is this man doing? Is he trying to eat a particularly hard piece of Swiss cheese that has no holes in it? Or is it a piece of Korean bean curd that's been left since the 10th century BC? Welcome to Conniptions. No, this is actually a piece of nylon. And from this, Anthony and his dad and his friend have milled this. This groove here will be fitted to a cable, and as you'll see later in the program, Anthony has made for his son Robbie a beautiful zip wire, and we'll see how that was made. Zip wires are not a new idea. 5,000 years ago, cavemen in these parts of a remote valley in Egypt of Silverado discovered wrote the following hieroglyphics on the walls, and here is our evidence recreated for you. In this ancient papyrus, they were using three pulleys, and they thought a brake would be necessary to stop the carriage running down the zip wire. Also elaborate devices for safety and so forth. But this proved not to be necessary. Back at civilization, here we come across the final embodiment of these thousands of years of development. Here we have the grooved nylon pulleys working with a nylon-covered steel wire rope. Aluminum lightweight carriage separated by steel separators, and a brilliant device that is used for holding, called a handle, split in the middle using common pipe flanges. Pinions for the bearings. No third pulley, you'll notice. And you're probably wondering why this ugly, ugly chain, which kind of spoils the aesthetic appearance of this beautiful device. It's a fail-safe device, and I'll show you later how the ends of the chains hook onto the person who's traveling, go across the top, so this whole thing should turn to dust, which of course it never would. The chain would come down on top of the cable, and a fail-safe design, once again, has proven to be the best. One more mystery in this wonderful development is the string, which you now see in front of you, and the reason for it is so that we can return the trolley back to the top of the mountain after we drop the man off, and buffer springs to stop you at the end of the drive, and of course the wonderful ancient turnbuckle that's been with us so many thousands of years. The return string is returned from a pulley on top of this pole, which is firmly in the ground, no stay provided, courtesy of Consolidated Edison. A 1,300-pound pull in that direction, supported here with a 200-pound load, supported here, the vector going straight here. How do we get rid of that force? Through this cable here. We obviously have no support in this direction from this. So we take the force back here, deep into the ground with a dead man with some 3 or 4 bags of concrete which are buried.
So this dead man isn't going anywhere.
But this live man is. This is James Twerp for Conniptions.
It's hard holding the camera and both handles. So as you can see with that, we had a lot of fun. So my sister, my beautiful sister, she ended up taking to drink, pickled her liver, and she passed away at 50 or just before 50. And it's a real shame because she was a light of Dad's life. And so the 4 of us became 3. But we got Susan to take the place. So we had 4 of us again. Mom and Dad spent a lot of time, retired years together, loving each other and fighting, but loving each other. Dad was always good-natured, and we had a lot of fun. So the 3 of us became the 2 of us. When my mom passed, we did all projects together, just everything. Dad and I were working on everything. This is the Aptera. Ron's getting one. Of course, this was 12 years ago when the first this company came and went. It's back again. Dad loved it. Yeah, Mom's last day was right around Christmas as well. So it's Christmas is going to be a hard time for me. But this is just July. Dad was still living upstairs. You'd climb the stairs every night, but he just got more and more tired. I had to fix a vent, and so I'd always bring him stuff because he's getting a little slower. Doesn't have the energy to get out there and watch the projects anymore. So I bring the projects to him. He said, "It's like a hat," and he put it on. So just as good-natured as ever. Sort of fought with renal disease for 2 years, and his kidneys just slowed him down. But he was always positive. It didn't matter how low he was always positive. Here he is at 6:55, the day before he died, and he's still smiling. Unfortunately, his very last days, he had to sleep downstairs for a month, but it went very quickly and very peacefully. The nurse said that often people's deaths are like their lives. And Dad was an easygoing, fun-loving kind of guy. And his death was an easygoing, fun-loving kind of situation. He even apologized to me for it taking so long. So with that, I want to pass this over to Charles, who came up with the term, the last great gentleman. I think that was a great description for Charles, for Dad, because he really was. He was stiff upper lip, pip, pip, never dwell on the butt, forgive and forget, always composed, always a great guy. So Charles, if you don't mind.
Well, Anthony, you did an excellent job honoring your dad today. Absolutely excellent. And yep, the last great gentleman, I thought of that as, the last months went by. Things got a little tougher for him and so on. He remained a perfect gentleman through the whole time. Unbelievable. I'll start with, I have my own little prop here. When my mom was getting in bad physical shape from pulmonary embolism, it's a long story. I had her get this little button, or I got a button that rang a remote doorbell. And the remote doorbell, she could call me from her bedroom. And this is how it sounds. So she could hear, I could know to come in. Well, we kept this by your dad for months and months and months. And he only pushed it one time. And that whole time, he didn't want to bother you. He fell down. I forgot, what was it, 2 times, I think? He broke his toe, wouldn't push the button. And I said, John, the button was here in case you need, I didn't want to bother you, he would say. So, I mean, he didn't want to be any trouble to anybody right to the end. And that it just came to me that, he's from another era too. The Victorian, he's one of the last of the people who had Victorian parents. And so they, had their own sort of, well, British stiff upper lip, let's, I can do it, don't want to bother anybody, do it myself. And he just was that through and through, right to the very end. I mean, really was. So anyway, the little button, I won't forget that. But anyway, no, your dad, oh, by the way, Anthony, if there is a celestial or galactic lottery out there for picking dads, you won the jackpot. Your dad just was the best, and it was really an honor to know him. And well, and he had such a long and eventful life. I mean, there's just a person could go on for ages. You wouldn't even know when to stop. But for me, probably some of the best times of my entire life were having conversations with your dad. Absolutely. Even when I was living far away, I'd call up your dad on the phone, and he just, if the TV was going in the background, I'd hear it, and I'd say, John, are you sure you can talk now? He said, oh, I'll turn that off, Charles. I'd rather talk to you. He said that over and over and over again. I'd rather talk to you. And he made you feel like you were the most important person in the room when he was talking to you. He, no, I had many splendid, some of the best times of my life were having conversations with your dad. Absolutely. And speaking of that, his conversation range was incredible. Not only technology, I mean, he was the first person to show me what a diode bridge, actually, you might have been the diode bridge person. He showed me, oh gosh, I got to refer to my little cheat sheet. What was that other thing? There are so many things that he taught me about that, oh gosh, I can't remember where that went now. But anyway, technical things, but also historical things. He did love history, and he also lived history. He was, from the 20s, 30s, 40s, and fascinating conversations I had where he would tell me how, for example, at the end of World War II, he said, oh yes, I walked to London on VE Day, Victory of Europe Day, to the palace in London, and was in that crowd that you see the famous photographs. And he could see in the distance, he said he was in the back of the crowd though, the Queen and the King and Churchill standing on the balcony. And I thought, wow, I know somebody who saw the King and Queen of England and Churchill at the end of World. I mean, that's unbelievable to know someone who's actually, seen that. Amongst other things, oh, the bombings of London, of course. He even told me that he witnessed King George VI's coronation carriage ride in 1937, going by Bond Street, I think it was. Anyway, so as a historic warehouse, he really, was just amazingly interesting. It had such a broad base of knowledge. He was the first person to teach. He taught me the difference between a shilling, a crown, and a threepenny bit. He taught me, the pre-decimal British system. He, not to even begin to mention just, well, again, endless other topics. And probably, oh yeah, and just to give you an idea of kind of his state of mind, his thinking pattern, and it never really, this really got me when he told me this. One day long ago with that blue 64 Chevrolet station wagon, it was actually kind of a little wagon for the time. He and I went from Laguna Beach to, I think it was Mission Viejo, driving, and by then the car was already 20, 30 years old, 20 some years old. And we just kind of tooled along, and all these modern cars were zooming by like rocket ships. When we finally got to our destination, he parked it, and he said, my poor little old Chevrolet did it one more time. He said, Charles, even the pharaohs of Egypt could not have done what we just did. And I just thought, wait a minute. When you really think about that, it never occurred to me. And that's the way his mind worked. It was putting in perspective. I mean, the things we do today, other places, pharaohs of Egypt, the rulers of vast empires couldn't do technology. And, the Chevelle was ancient technology at that time, but it still could cart you around. Within minutes, we went 15 miles, and the pharaohs would have had to have taken, days going, by caravan. But sorry, the cheat sheet once again. But anyway, but yeah, he led such a long and extraordinary life. A person could pretty much, I don't even know how you would wrap up that whole thing verbally. But oh, and one thing I must say too, I forgot about this. When I would call him from wherever I was on the phone, the first thing he would say, I think he loved to say my name. I love to hear him say my name, I have to say, or no, I should put it that way. I love to hear the way he said my name, because he'd say, Charles. That'd be the way, this wonderful, glorious accent. I felt like the King of England briefly. That's how your dad would make you feel, like the King of England for a moment, and of course, vocabulary, unbelievable, all those things. But just as a person, he just made you feel so good about yourself, and you felt so comfortable with him. You always felt like you were so important. And anyway, I have to admit that it's absolutely been an honor and a privilege to know him through my life. I'm glad I've been able to know him, and truly an honor and a privilege to know John, and definitely absolutely a true gentleman in the purest form. And so, yes, he absolutely will be terribly missed. Definitely. Thank you.
You will. Would anybody here like to speak first? And then we're going to have my cousins in, actually, it doesn't matter the order. I do have to take this down. But if anybody would like to come up and say something, please do. And I'm going to stop presenting on this. Okay, so that should probably be. Thanks, Jill.
I'll do my best to get through this. Sorry, you're gonna have to be a little bit more patient with me than the others. Granddad was a staple in my life. He was there, obviously, throughout my entire life, but so was Wind Waste. And it's one of those things when you're a child, you don't really understand what you have until you're older. And as an adult now, I wish I could go back in time with my adult brain and really, truly understand what I had growing up. I do have the luxury of having basically a clone of Granddad, with the exception of you still have some gray hair. He would have been pure white by now. But I did want to, even though losing him on Christmas Eve was very hard, Christmas will not be sad for me, because Christmas was the day that I saw Santa Claus. I don't remember my age, actually, but 6. So I obviously, it's a 6-year-old brain. I don't have all of the memories, so I'll let Dad fill in the blanks. But what I remember is a huge noise up on the roof, massive, ridiculously loud hooves. Could it be the horses up on the roof? You could hear the hooves from Santa's sleigh going all the way across the roof. And Dad comes running into my room, I think, and tells me, that I need to come downstairs. And so we run down, and I'm looking through the little bars on the stairs, and there he is in the living room, is Santa Claus, filling the stockings up on the window. What I did not recognize or know at the time was that I was being very closely watched to make sure that I wouldn't actually try and go see Santa Claus, because it turns out that was Granddad. And so maybe Dad can fill in the blanks regarding the technology behind that event, but I am going to always remember that every single Christmas, to make sure that memory of him always stays whole and fulfilling just as much as he was. So, okay, I think that's all I can handle, but I loved him very much, and he will be missed forever. And I hope that I can live up to his legend.
Before I open it up to Zoom people, so any Zoom people who want to talk, click the raise hand, and Jillian will then click a button who will tell you to unmute. But go ahead and raise your hand at any point.
Click reactions.
So reactions?
Can you do your slide for the reaction? Oh, never mind.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I'll put put that on here to remind people. Would anybody else like to say something? Memories of Dad here, because
We have Brian.
oh, Brian's up. Okay, great. Okay, so Brian, take it away, Brian. Once you unmute yourself.
Hi everyone. It's lovely to see such a great worldwide turnout. And I'm in Salamanca at the moment, staying with some friends. John would love the idea that I've got using a 2-SIM phone connected to data that's then connecting to my computer, and that we're all able to see each other and speak to each other. Never mind what the pharaohs could never do. We've gone beyond what we could ever have thought about doing in the last century. One of the things that I want to talk about a little bit is John's extraordinary generosity. In 1969, when the moon landing was on, I was just turned 9 years old, and we didn't see, because John was in California and you didn't make trips very often in those days. So I didn't really know John very well, but he knew I was interested in the exploration, and I was also quite interested in collecting stamps about space. And he sent me not only a first day cover, but a whole sheet of stamps, which I've still got, that they issued to commemorate the moon landings. And then about a month later, a box appears from the postman on the doorstep, quite a large box, and inside it was a model of that you had to make yourself, of Saturn V rocket and all the different parts and the landing thing and the capsule. It stood about a yard high, and I made it and exhibited it at school, and it's got broken somehow. And I don't. Anyway, I must have mentioned it to John. And a couple of weeks later, another rocket turned up on the doorstep that he sent all the way over to the States. So I actually got 2 of them. Oh yeah, just a couple of comments about what you said. That Chevrolet that's come up a couple of times, I learned to drive in that car. I drove John to work for a week at Universal, and then did a test in the Chevrolet. Being in the States, the test was very easy. And then because I had an American license, I could drive for a year in the UK, which meant I only ever had one paid for driving lesson, because I'd been driving for a year on that license. That was my memory of that car. I also remember that I had to buy my best friend asked me to buy a guitar while I was. Oh, sorry, yes, I was meant. So I came over in 1978, and it was a gap year before they were called gap years. And so I went down to Laguna Beach. Pat threw me out for unspecified offences after about 2 days. So I was banned. So I had to go and live in the motorhome, which the GMC motorhome they still have, but Anthony still has, was parked up in a house they owned but rented out in North Hollywood and Cahuenga Boulevard. And I remember John, I had to buy a guitar for a friend of mine who asked me to, and John kept saying, "Oh, my neighbour Lester, he's got loads of guitars. He'll give you a guitar." And I thought, what's he know about electric guitars, you know? So I kind of ignored it. And it's only much later I found that Lester was Les Paul, and of course, one of the most, the way Les Paul's name lives on now is through the famous Gibson Les Paul guitar. So I missed out big time. And one of my regrets later in life was in my own career in sound, which probably owed something to John. For the BBC, I was working on a Radio 2 concert, probably in the 90s, and Les Paul was one of the people there. And I thought, oh, shall I go and say hello? Shall I go and see if he remembers John? And I just thought, no, it would probably be a really bad thing to do. And it was only later I heard that story about Les Paul inviting him to New York, and Anthony didn't mention this, but apparently, Les Paul says, "I would never have invented multi-track recording without John." So again, it's an amazing accolade. But the other thing I'll say about that house was, we've all been talking about how smart John was, but the lodgers in the house that rented the house where the motorhome was parked, it was all covered in this greenery. And John kept saying, "Oh, you know, those tomatoes. When those tomatoes are going to come out?" He never realised it was marijuana. The whole of the back of the house was covered in marijuana plants. Which we told, and I remember the guests telling me they were quite annoyed with John because of his glaucoma, he could get marijuana from the state, which they said would have been the good stuff, and they wanted him to get that on their behalf. But I don't think he ever did. And then the other thing, when he came to visit us, you know, he worked. He and my father, he'd come over a lot, and they'd work on projects, and latterly. We'd also work on some projects together, and there was a very old radio, Armstrong radio I had that had a fault in it, and John, it was of an age where you could take the cards out. It was one of the first non-valve radios. Took the card out and photocopied it, reversed the photocopy so he could make a diagram, so he could see what the circuit board was on a piece of paper, did all the maths, and then could tell me exactly which component we needed to buy to fix it. And just nobody does that anymore. It's just unheard of. Nobody has that level of, well, Anthony probably has, but people just imply they replace whole components. Nobody goes down to that depth. And lastly, I just remember that on all those times when you talk to him about things, I don't know if you remember, he always had a pen in his top pocket, and he'd take this pen out and he'd draw you most wonderful diagrams of how things worked, or the maths or the geometry and things like that. And it was just, you know, we loved him very much, which, yeah. And he was so much Bill's favorite as well. She always said what a great brother he would been to her, because he was always prepared to explain things to her very clearly and help her out. So I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Oh, that's great. You know, you should have approached Les. You know, Les labeled or asked for Dad to be his pallbearer, you know, like carry his coffin. He said, I'm not strong enough to carry a coffin, so he didn't do it. But and I got my driver's license on that same car too. The good old blue Chevrolet. So Jill, can you pick the, sorry? Oh yeah, very good. Oh, Jeff Solo. Yes. Okay. So Jeff, can you
Yes, just needed to unmute there for a minute. Of course, Benita, who spoke earlier, is my sister, and all three of us got to know John after they moved in up the street in Laguna Beach on Chiquita Drive, and I would only, since I now live in Philadelphia, which I have since 1989, I only would get out to California every so often. But in the last couple of years when I was out there, I happened to be a cellist, and I would always borrow a cello so that I could practice when I was visiting family and visiting Laguna. And so one of the things that would happen frequently is after, when I was there for about a week, Benita would arrange a little concert where I would play some Bach at our house. And of course, John and Pat would always come down for the concerts. And so I felt very privileged to be able to, since he wasn't in the last couple of years going out to concerts, to be able to bring one home just down the block. And this July, while I didn't play a concert, Benita and I went up to visit. And I was now, when this sad event happened, I was very glad that we got to visit just this past summer.
You're unmuted, Dad.
Hello. Okay. Sorry. My name's Peter Mack. I'm Brian's brother, and I'd just like to say a few words too. One of the things I always admired about John was his engineer's approach to life. He was always a practical problem solver. You felt, and you knew in fact, that he could fix anything as long as there were still spares in Sears department store, as there usually were at that time. Even a 25-year-old fridge could be fixed, and John would fix it. The other aspect of his engineering, I think, was how much he loved to explain things to people. He really liked telling us about how things worked, explaining the history, especially of technological things, or looking up at a row of wires in the street and telling you what each different wire was capable of doing. When I first went to California in 1974, I had the privilege of going in to watch him at work at 20th Century Fox while they were doing the soundtrack for the film The Towering Inferno. And I think the image I got from that was of how much the other people in the team valued John's contribution. And they valued it especially because of John's basic science knowledge. So whenever there would be a new sound desk to work from, he would be the one who would work out how the desk really functioned and how they could make it do the things that they wanted it to do. And of course, that practical skill was even more valuable in something that was even more important to sound technicians than making the movie. And what was more important to sound technicians than making the movie was parking on the lot. And they were always engaged in a kind of struggle with the authorities of the studio to try to ensure that they could somehow park on the lot. And I remember in particular that at that time there was a card that the very privileged film stars were allowed to have to let them get through. And you could see John and his friends in their lunch break with a whole set of mini magnets making fake versions of this card so that they would be able to push it into the machine and trick the machine into letting their cars onto the lot. He was always up to date with innovations, and he always wanted to explain to you how wonderful that they were. But I think also he was a man who did what he wanted to do in life. He felt that he'd managed the things that he wanted, that he was happy, he was satisfied, he'd taken this great adventure and it had worked out. And perhaps the best thing of all for him in his life was his wonderful relationship with Anthony, that you can hardly imagine a son that would suit better to a father, or a father who would suit better to a son. And I think in all sorts of ways, the way in which he interacted with Anthony was a kind of culmination of what he wanted in his life. And so I think it was so great that Anthony and also the other people who could help Anthony were able to look after John so well in those last months of his life. And I'm sure that John must have been fantastically grateful to them for everything that they'd done for his life. Thank you.
You're absolutely right. He was so thankful. I remember he was, when he first was told by a doctor that he should go onto hospice, the very first thing he did was thank me. He was actually reduced to tears, thanking me for what I've done for him. And so you're absolutely right. I got to tell you one trick about that parking pass. He got the stars parking passes and figured the pattern on there. And then he figured out, oh my gosh, you could make a master key. So actually, Dad's parking pass got him into more parking lots than any star at Universal Studios. Power of technology, right? Oh man. So I think that's it. Is there anybody else with their hand raised? Okay, if anybody remotely wants to say something, go ahead and raise your hand, and I'll just tell one more story that you reminded me of about how everybody at the studio respected him. I don't take the train very often here, but I was coming down from LA to Irvine in a train, an Amtrak train, and I sat next to a guy and we're talking. Oh, what do you do? I do this. What do you do? He says, oh, I work at Universal Studios. Oh, my dad used to work there. What do you do? Oh, I'm a sound guy. Oh, my dad was a sound. Oh, no, yeah, actually. Yeah, no, yeah. What do you do? I work at Universal. I said, oh, my dad, John Mack, worked there. He goes, John Mack, the John Mack? And I'm going, do you know him? He's been retired for 10 years. I go, oh my God. He leaves these little notes inside the machines with all the diagrams and everything. He's well known for his, this work and that work. And I said, oh, well, what do you do? And he says, oh, I work on foreign film, foreign editing. Foreign editing, what's that? He says, oh, let me explain it to you. He says, look, everybody in the sound department is ranked. There's the people at the top. They work on the feature films. That's where your dad was. He was the top of the top. Then under that is TV shows, and then cartoons, and then Pond Scum. And then under Pond Scum is foreign film editing. That's what I do. I always loved this. He's under Pond Scum. Anyway, I was just amazed that 10 years after Dad's retirement, people in the department still knew who he was. So apparently he did a good job. Well, I think I'd like to tie this up then, unless there's anybody else. No? Okay, well, hey, thank you so much for coming. And I really appreciate seeing you here. And I totally appreciate the number of people who came in remotely and everything. Thank you so much for attending, and have a good day. We're now on off. So everybody here is invited to come to my house or Dad's house for some lunch. Susan's got some food prepared, and we've got some other little show and tell items there too. So thank you so much. Bye-bye. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, we got Juliana.
Oh, wait, Juliana? Oh, Julie. Hi, Julie. Oh, Julie. Oh, yeah. Oh, wait. Okay, sorry. Julie, could Kitty just say hello? Is she still able to speak?
Say hello, Nanina. Say hello, Mama.
Oh, Kitty. Hello, Kitty. Hi,
say hello. Hello, darling.
You're the last of the generation, Kitty. You're it. Yeah.
Hello, sweetheart. Where was this?
So good to see you. All right, I just wanted you to say goodbye.
Anthony, can I just read something?
Oh, I'd love you. That would be great.
And flights of angels take thee to thy rest, my darling Uncle John. May you now be at peace with your beautiful Sydney and Nina. What a truly dear and decent gentleman you have always been throughout your whole life. Always there for us with such kindness. I have such wonderful and happy memories being with you, singing It's a Small World After All at Disneyland, with us all in the boat, being terrified in your studio whilst you worked on the movie Earthquake. So many memories to treasure. You have been such a great and wonderful uncle. Thank you, and I will forever miss you and love you. God bless Uncle John and all of you. Love you all so much.
Oh, so sweet. Oh, thank you. Oh, so sweet. I'm so choked up. Thank you so much. And I'm hoping to come out there once COVID is sort of a little less dangerous. I'll come out there and see you guys and hug you in person. Hi, Casmira.
Hey, Uncle Anthony. Love you all so much. What a beautiful service. Beautiful service.
Oh, it's beautiful. So thank you. Okay, bye-bye. All right, so is that it? Oh yeah, sure. Is there anybody else who, I can't reach all the way to you. Oh, all right, let me bring it around. Bring it around. Do you want to bring it over there?
Yeah, I just need to see the screen.
Oh, okay. that screen or the screen?
Just so that we have it and everyone here can see it in the chat from Lisa. I can't speak, I just can't. Maybe that'd be better. Sorry, there's just a few comments in the chat that I thought were worth saying.
Okay, so well, I can't. I have to-
Right here.
Um,
Get this closer to you.
So our friend Lisa in New Zealand says, I can't speak, just can't. But it's been a true honor and privilege to have known John and to have seen him and you, Anthony, in action. He will live on in you, Anthony, every time we see and hear you and your stories.
Oh, Lisa, thank you so much. Thank you, Lisa.
Sunny, my
Sunny.
sister's daughter, says, love you, Anthony, and loved your dad so much.
Oh,
Jan Kingsley says, thank you so much for having arranged this, Anthony and Jillian, a wonderful memory of John. Beverly Barnes, his tenant for I think 8 years, said he will be so very missed. And
Thank you,
Gloria
Beverly.
says it was wonderful to hear and see Anthony speak of John. Thank you for letting us know of this marvelous memorial. Would love to have the recording to share with my family.
oh, thank you.
Okay.
Oh, sweet.
Is that it?
Okay.
Yeah,
All right. So, okay, that's it.
And then just for online people, since I know you couldn't see the items as well as the rest of us, I will sweep with one of the cameras over everything so you can see those things as well.
Yeah, the portable one. Okay, very good. Okay, well, thank you. That's it then. So, I guess we'll go off to wait. This and unmute the phone, and then we can use the phone for it.
It's not sharing anymore.
So sorry, I didn't show what I was talking about, so I didn't know what to do. Yes.
No worries. Okay, sorry guys. So, can you guys see through the display okay? So I can't actually talk because of the play. Thank you. His briefcase that he came here in. There's the script. Cleopatra script there. You can't see it. There's the shirt. And his Emmy. Good old Emmy. Okay, I'm going to change the settings. So if you guys want to unmute yourselves, you can without permissions. So
Okay, you guys should be able to communicate. Someone's willing to unmute.
You guys are free to do anything you'd like. You can unmute yourselves, but everyone here can still see you on the screen, but otherwise we're just chatting now. Thank you so much, guys, for attending online. We do appreciate it. Thank you, Jeff.
From Philadelphia.
Hey, Kaz.
Oh, thank you, Juliana.
And the one is 4, I love that. No, actually, we have, this is a U4. No, we actually have 2 4s.
Yes. Hey, guys. Hi.
We love you, darling. We love you.
Love you too.
Love you, darling.
Miss all of you guys.
Rob. Hi, Rob. We love you all so much.
Love you too.
Sending hugs across the ocean.
Yes, can't wait till we can travel across the ocean again. Hi, Kitty.
See you soon. Kisses and much as hugs.
I hadn't used it in.
You want me to bring my my children back? I've got my 3 children here. You want me to bring them real quick?
For the most part, I was half in control of this stuff. See that? It was working, yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring this over closer to my dad because he's chatting about the stuff. So. Oh, maybe not. Never mind. Never mind, we're packing stuff. Okay.
Sorry, amateur camera guy over here. There you go.
Uncle Anthony.
Oh, that's in the car. Okay.
Charles.
You have all these cameras.
Well, I haven't.
There we go.
Oh, yeah, that was in the back of that. That's in the back of it. We'll leave that. Okay. Okay, and yeah, okay, great. Cool. This way,
Susan. Susan.
Actually, I'm not sure. That's my aunt. She looks a lot like Susan. At the end of there.
There they are. Look. Wow. Oh my God.
This is Mini Rob.
Hello, little one. Hello. Oh my gosh, she's so big.
And she's in 6th grade. She's in 6th grade now, and they just announced. Yeah, they just announced a couple of days ago that she won Student of the Year at her elementary school. So
wow.
she's
Congratulations.
she's very excited.
Oh, well done, darling. Can't wait to see you again. Student of the Year in her grades, Mummy.
Yeah. Oh. You see the dog? Oh, look at the doggo. He's a big dog.
So a big nose.
It's awesome.
Can't
Oh, it's so
wait to
good
see
seeing you
guys
all.
again.
Yeah.
Hopefully soon we can see you
One more
all.
coming. One more coming.
Oh,
This is
look
my
at
wife
her.
Shannon, who you've all met, of course, and Kelly. Go ahead and put your face down. Go ahead and see your
Look
face.
how big she is now.
This is Kelly.
Hello. You say hello.
Right here in the camera, honey.
This is great grandma. Great grandma. Or great greats, I don't know.
All right.
See you soon.
Bye, guys. See you later.
Bye. Lots of love.
Okay, guys. Let's go.
How good
I'll
we
just-
are.
I'll break this down.
We'll probably be open.
They used to laugh all the time.
I meant to say,
I guess we can all be united. I'm gonna leave, okay?
Because I
leave. Oh, we say goodbye. No? Well, they're leaving, Mummy. No one's saying goodbye. Okay. Say goodbye. Bye.
Bye. See you later.
I love you. Thank you so much. I love you.
Right, bye, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and stop
Bye,
now.
Jillian. Bye, Jillian.
Thank you again for making it, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Bye, darling. Bye.
Then my dill pickle.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Bye-bye, everybody. Love you.
Love you, love you.
Are you going to be taking that with you? Well, I can. Were you going to? There's just a couple things.